Well, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you for this webinar. My name is Derek Melber, and I am the technical evangelist for the Active Directory Solutions team here at ManageEngine. And I know some of you, it's in the afternoon, some of you it might be kind of evening, and for me it's bright and early in the morning. So we have people from all over the world, which is fantastic. Also, I think we have a pretty, I don't know about exciting, I mean, it's security, but a pretty exciting webinar for you today. We at ManageEngine have been trying to focus on current trends of things that are going on, and obviously security is one of those trends that we feel have been extremely important. So we spent quite a bit of time putting together solutions for organizations and administrators to better understand and better implement security practices in and around Active Directory and your Windows servers. So today we're going to focus on a concept called security hardening, and we're going to go over the concept, and then we're going to go through some examples. We're going to talk about passwords, authentication, access, and we are going to be focusing on that as well. Before we get started into the main material, I do want to discuss just a little bit about who I am, for those of you that have not met me or seen me present before. As I said, I am the technical evangelist, which really means that I get the opportunity to go around the world helping organizations and administrators more efficiently see Active Directory. I am an Active Directory MVP at this point. I have been both a group policy MVP and Active Directory MVP for about the last 16 years. Again, it's a great opportunity for me to meet some amazing administrators and try to help out. I have written quite a few books over those years. My latest book is what you see here on the screen, which is the Group Policy Resource Kit for Microsoft Press. And even though it does have that horrible word Vista on the front, it is a pretty good resource for administrators trying to develop solutions and implement security as well as other controls through group policy. And I do want to point you to 3 different resources. First and foremost, that is my email address. I strongly encourage emails, questions, whether it be with regard to security hardening or anything else in Active Directory. Really, it is my job to help administrators solve problems that you're having with Active Directory, group policy, security. So please send me those questions in any time. I do want to point you to our blog. I'm going to send you out to our blog right now. If you go to our main page, on our main page, ManageEngine.com, if you go over here to Community, and under Community you'll see blogs, and you'll see that we have an Active Directory blog right here. This does not require any information about you, and you'll see that we post weekly. And the goal of these posts, first and foremost, are to be short. What we want to do is we want to make sure that we're not taking too much of your time on a weekly basis. So I really try to make these 5 minutes or less of your time. And the blogs are geared primarily around just basic information. We're not trying to get you into our products that much. We do blog on how our products solve problems, but really we're trying to just get you information. The second thing that I want to go over, sorry I keep reading the question, so sometimes my brain goes in a different direction, sorry if I pause. The third resource beyond my email and our blog is to talk a little bit about our security hardening site. Now, if you go back to our main page, and on our main page, if you just click on Active Directory, in the bottom right-hand corner of the drop-down, you'll see Security Hardening for Active Directory. Now, this particular site was specifically designed by us because of some things that we were hearing in the industry with regard to Windows. And I'm going to give you action items as we go through today. And the very first action item that I'm going to encourage that you do is you come and you watch this video. There's a link to this video right here. Now, this video is of a Microsoft product manager talking at a tech ed in Barcelona a couple of years ago. So it was before it was renamed to Ignite. And in this particular video, the Microsoft employee is talking about the next generation, which of course is the current generation of Active Directory security. Now, in this video, he talks about two different technologies. One is called just-in-time, or JIT, and the other is called Just Enough Access, or JIA. And he's walking through these security concepts and how they're going to help administrators. And in the end, all of us kind of looked at each other and said, this seems like a tremendous amount of work and money just to solve security issues in Active Directory that can easily be solved with the tools and technologies that are there today. So what we did is we put together this site, and if you go to the bottom of this particular site, there are some very good resources for you. Now, these resources are organized in different areas of security of Active Directory in your Windows servers. So, for example, if you look at the Active Directory delegation area, you'll see a multitude of blogs that are here and designed to help you secure Active Directory, domain controllers, and your Windows servers. So all of these areas are all designed around this premise of security hardening. So when we start to look at what is security hardening, we have to look at the traditional model first. And then looking beyond the traditional model, we've kind of put together some concepts, some very basic concepts to help organizations secure Windows servers, not only today, but ongoing. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to walk through 3 examples of how to put together next generation security hardening in your organization. So let's first of all talk about what is traditional security hardening. Now, I've seen many organizations, me myself have been involved in many of these projects, where organizations say that they're going to secure their Windows servers. Now, if we really take a look at the reality of most networks, most have servers that are put into production, and before those servers are put into production, those servers go through a checklist. The checklist is going to make sure that service packs are installed. They're going to make sure that certain applications are installed, maybe certain ports or the built-in firewall is configured, and also security is put in place on those servers. So for most organizations, when a Windows server is put into production, it is secured. But over time, the security of those servers drift away from what it should be. So these security hardening projects are normally implemented to get Windows servers back to a particular state. Now, during these security hardening projects, there are 3 phases. Now, let's say that I have 100 servers. In order to make sure that those 100 servers are secured properly, I have to run reports to make sure I know what the current security settings are on those servers. Make sense? Of course, very simple. Now, once I get the report, now I have to analyze. I have to analyze to determine if the settings that I run reports on match what the security settings should be. Now, these first 2 steps might seem simple, but I'm going to show you that often they are more complex than we actually give them credit for. But let's say that for the 100 servers, we get the reports, then we analyze what the settings should be. Now, the analysis here can really be based on a couple of different things. First, it should be based on whatever the foundation is for our security for when servers are put into production. 2, they should be based on compliance regulations. 3, they should be based on any changes that have occurred since your security documentation was put in place. And 4, based on current trends of how to secure servers. Once we have the analysis determined, we need to configure the security on these servers. The configuration of that security normally is done by group policy. Not always, but normally. So let's say that we start a project on the 1st of the month. We walk through the reporting, the analysis of the configuration, and at the end of that month, on the very last day of that month, we are completed with our project. So let's say on July 31st, 2016, we end our project, we check off that project, and we move on. Well, this concept of security hardening shouldn't stop there. And the reason it shouldn't stop there is because, yes, our goal is to secure our servers and get them to a particular point, but the problem is that we get drift. Even a week later, on our 100 servers, if we were to run the exact same reports that we ran on the first day, July 1st, and now we're running them on August 7th, what are the chances that some of those security settings have changed already? Now, if we move out a month, 3 months, 6 months, how many of those security settings that we put in place during our security hardening project have drifted what we want? I guarantee you many of those settings drift. So the question becomes, how do we ensure that our Windows servers are correctly hardened for the security that we want, not just at a point in time, but over time? Well, we at ManageEngine believe that organizations should look at the next generation security hardening. Well, what does that look like? Well, notice the first 3 steps are the same. We report, we analyze, and we configure. But if we stop at that configuration point, that's when we get drift, and we as admins don't know what's changing on our servers. So what we need to do is we need to add monitoring. We need to actually track the changes for the security that we put in place to know when things change. And if the security is so important, we need to have an alert sent to us when the change occurs. Now, I'm just going to throw out a quick example so to give you a mental picture of what I'm talking about. Every single one of us on this webinar has a domain admins group in Active Directory. The domain admins group is used all the time. If you were to go through a security hardening project, you would ensure that the domain admins group membership was correct. But let's say that a week later you are at a conference and the other admins are trying to solve a problem, and in part of that trying to solve the problem, they add another person to the domain admins group and they don't tell you about it. They solve the problem, but they forget to remove the user out of the domain admins group. 1 week later, you now have a new user in the domain admins that shouldn't be there. But if you were monitoring these changes and receiving alerts, you would have received an email when you were at the conference telling you that someone was added to the domain admins group. Notice the difference? So with monitoring and alerting, we can actually now see what is happening within Active Directory and its security. So let's move on and talk about some examples. Now, I'm going to talk about passwords. Most of us on this webinar have to deal with auditors. Most of us are concerned about password security. Now, often, especially in the US, we have auditors that come to us and they ask us for the domain password policy. You might have had to generate this for someone in your organization. Now, if we jump into a live Active Directory environment, this is my Active Directory environment here, okay? So this is my domain controller. You see my domain controller here. And let's say that someone asks you for the domain password policy for your domain. Now, often what I find is that administrators will come to the default domain policy. They will go to the settings reports. They will come down here under security, password policy, and they will take a screen capture of this information right here. Now, if you are one of these administrators that are reporting on your password policy in this way, I'm going to encourage you to stop doing it this way, because this report is worthless. Okay? Now, I'm going to start to weave together our concept, right? If we go back here to our concept of reporting, analyzing, configuring, monitoring, and alerting, I'm going to walk you through these 5 steps correctly with regard to the password policy. So we're here in our domain controller, and we are looking at information that's being displayed on the screen with regard to the password policy. But I am telling you right now that this report is absolutely worthless. Okay? This report is worthless because we do not have any assurance that the settings in this policy are actually in place. So my second action item to you, beyond the first one, which is watch that video, is I want you all to run the correct report for your password policy. The correct way to run the report is a built-in command and tool on every Windows machine, not just servers, even desktops. seccpol.msc. secpol, seccpol.msc, allows you to look at the password policy. Now, on the left is the current password policy that's in place on this domain controller. On the right is the report that you potentially ran. Do you see why reporting is so important? So on the right, this is a report of a file. On the left, this is the current configuration on this domain controller for the password policy. So first of all, I'm going to go back to the concept of next generation security hardening. If you don't run the right report, you are looking at the wrong information, and everything you do from that point is worthless. Understand? Okay. So once we run the report, now we have to analyze. Well, during the analysis of some configurations, it's not as basic as just running that report. Let's talk about the password policy. Now, how many password policies can I have in one domain using group policy? You'll notice that I'm using group policy here. How many of these can I have in the same domain using group policy? The answer is 1. So this password policy is the password policy that's being deployed using group policy. Do I have another technology that allows me to implement password policies in the same domain? And the answer is yes. If I go through and I run a tool called Edit, and I come down here under my system, password policies container, I can have a fine-grained password policy or even multiple fine-grained password policies. These are not implemented through group policy. So during the analysis of the password policy, we determine that we could potentially have more than just the group policy-based password policy. We could have multiple of these. How do we run reports on the fine-grained password policy? That's a difficult question. Well, there is no easy answer, okay? Now, some of you may be saying, well, you can run PowerShell, and yes, you can. You can absolutely run PowerShell to get that information. But if you run PowerShell, you're going to find that it's really not that simple to get the information. Now, there are many tools out there, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to show you different ways to get the information, because the end goal of today's webinar is securing your information. One way to do this is to use a tool called AD Manager Plus. Now, AD Manager Plus allows you to run reports. You'll see how quick I'm getting to the information here. I'm getting all the users, and I'm generating reports for all the users. And with 3 clicks, I actually know which password settings object, which is a fine-grained password policy, is being applied to any user. Now, the way that fine-grained password policies work is if I have a fine-grained password policy applied to a group and that user is part of that group, it'll show up here. If I do not have any PSO applied showing up here, it's going to default back to the password policy that we generated using SecPal. So now you have ways to generate correct reports for the password policies. Okay? Now, once we generate the reports, right? So we use SecPal for the GPO-based policy, AD Manager Plus for the fine-grained password policy. Now we have to analyze. The analysis here is, do we have the most stringent password policy that we can have for that user? This should be based on current trends, attacks, technologies, compliance regulations. This should be based on everything. So you need to evaluate that. We don't have enough time for me to go into detail going through my 2 cents on this, but I'm here to tell you that passwords today are easily cracked. So we need to make sure that we are upping the game with our passwords. Once you determine what you feel comfortable with the password policy, now you're going to go into either the default domain policy or the GPO that's configuring it, and you are going to implement the password policies, whether it be the GPO or fine-grained password policies that you feel meet the requirements for your organization. What do you do now? Well, you've reported, you've analyzed, and you've configured. I'm going to guess that some of you, when you run SecPal, you're going to be shocked that the password policy isn't what it should be. If it drifted once, it's going to drift again. So how do we ensure that inside of Active Directory, our password policy doesn't change without us knowing? That is very simple. You just need a tool that can track the changes. AD Audit Plus is designed to do this. I know at any time if my password policy changes because I have a report that tells me if my password policy changes. And not only do I have a report, which is the monitoring piece, I have an alert set up in such a way that if my password policy changes, I can actually receive an email. So the idea is Once you have your configuration in place, you just need a tool that can track if these settings change. And if they change and it's that important, then you need to have an alert set up, right? And the alert can email you when that change occurs. This is the power of the monitoring and alerting piece of the next generation of the concept that I'm talking about. And again, I'm just showing you tools. If you decide that you just want to use Microsoft technologies to do this, that's not a problem. Right here, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. You set up, I'll even show you all the steps. You simply need to go into group policy. This is how to set up tracking of changes like this. And you're going to come into here in a GPO under your audit policy. And in the audit policy, you're going to define the correct audit policy to track those changes. Okay? Once you have this set up, then you're going to go into Event Viewer. And in the Event Viewer, in the security log, you're going to go through however many entries you have. And in this example, in my demo environment, I have 165,000 entries. You just need to go through 165,000 entries and you manually generate a report for when this changes. Now, you can also get down to the event IDs, and for every single Microsoft event ID, you can actually send yourself an email when that ID shows up. Now, what you're going to find, notice how these event IDs duplicate a lot, because there isn't an event ID for the password policy changing. There's only event ID for GPO changing. So you're going to have a lot of false positives, but you can do it. This is how you would do it manually. What I'm telling you is there are tools designed to specifically allow you to go into a simple click, and now over the last 6 months, I know when my password policy changed. See the difference? What I'm telling you is the right tool can save you so much time and headache. And the right tool can give you insights into what is changing in your environment that you today can't see. Okay? Now imagine if you go through and you run the right report, you make the configuration, you set up monitoring and alerting. When you receive an email telling you the password policy changed, I guarantee you, you're going to immediately care that that change occurred. This is where we are talking about the idea of next generation security hardening. Okay? Now, let's move on and talk about another example, authentication protocols. With regard to authentication protocols, you have some historical authentication protocols and you have some newer authentication protocols. Because Microsoft wants to ensure that your applications run, they allow the older LM and Ntlm authentication protocols to still function. What your job is to determine if those are being allowed, and if they are being allowed, you need to analyze if you can get rid of them. Depending on if you can or can't get rid of them, you need to make the configurations such that you have the most secure environment. Once you have the configurations in place, now you need to just monitor and alert the use of those protocols. Okay? Let's run a report. How do we report on if LM and Ntlm are being used? Well, we're going to go back to our domain controller, and we're going to go back to our handy-dandy command, seccpol.msc. With seccpol.msc, we can go to our local policies, security options, and down here, we can determine if land manager is being allowed. Now, let's decrypt this. We have to analyze this. This is the current setting. We've run the report. Now, we can't change it here to see all the options because it's being deployed with group policy. So now we're going to go back to group policy. We are going to edit any GPO because they'll all have the setting in here. And we're going to look at that setting to determine what can be set. Now, here is our land manager authentication, and you'll notice that we have 6 options. The default is right here. This is what's in place right now on my domain controller, and this is what Microsoft puts in place. You will notice that it is not denying fusing land manager, which means land manager is supported. The only way for you to deny land manager is to set one of the bottom 2 options. Okay? The question is, can you set one of the 2 options? Well, now we have to run different reports. We have to somehow determine if land manager is being used in our domain. Now, if we decrypt land manager, the concept of land manager, users, when they authenticate to domain controllers, they use Kerberos. When they access other resources, if Kerberos can't be used, 99% of the time they use Ntlm v2. It is rare that a user uses anything but Ntlm v2 and Kerberos. So why are we allowing land manager? Well, we have service accounts, and those service accounts are running legacy applications, and those legacy applications were designed to use, that's right, land manager and Ntlm. So we have to determine if we're using land manager and Ntlm. How do we do that? Well, inside of a group policy, starting with Windows Server 2008 R2, you have the ability to audit Ntlm authentication. See it right here? I have that configured in my domain. When you enable auditing here, that result shows up in Event Viewer, but not in the security log. The results of whether or not you are using Ntlm show up here under your Ntlm operational log, and you'll see here that I'm using Ntlm. Okay? Now, I'm gonna take a side step and mention something and then come back. All of this information that I'm going over is located in the security hardening site. Details of how to do all this are right there, okay? I'm just describing why we're doing this, okay? So don't worry about the details, worry about the concept, and when you get off of the webinar, that's when you take the action to go to the website and then implement this, okay? All right, now I'm back. Let's talk about this. So now I know that Ntlm is being used, which means I either, during analysis, have to determine which thing is using it, right? So this is server 100, and it is, this one is a domain, that one's a server, but a server is still using it, right? Right? Server blocked the audit. So this means that it's being used. So on server 100, I would go to that machine and determine why it's using Ntlm, okay? Now, once I determine if Ntlm and land manager are required, I either can go back to policy and I can disable this setting right here by refusing land manager, or I have to leave it in place. One of the two is the outcome of that analysis. All right? Now, this is where the monitoring and alerting gets a little more complex, because what I'm going to suggest to you is you have to monitor if only those accounts that are using Land Manager are using it. You want to determine if someone else is using it. How do you do that? Well, with the right tool, I can actually determine through reports and through log-on activity, right? So here, if I go to the last, let's go to December. I didn't have any logons in December. Okay, that's kind of weird. Let's go to October here. Okay, why don't I have any logon activity? Oh, that's why. James Bond. Okay, so now I'm going to come in here and I am going to add everybody. Okay, so here's all of my logon activity for October 2015. For all of my users, all hours, I'm going to get a report for all of that logon activity. You'll see that I had quite a bit. Right here, the logon service tells me if Ntlm or Land Manager was used. I can come over here and I can input Ntlm. Now, you will determine here that in October I did not have anyone using Land Manager or Ntlm. See that? Now, what I can do is I can actually save this report, and I can actually now have a new report profile based on what I have here. So now I can set up an alert for my new report profile, and if anyone uses that authentication protocol, I can get an email. Notice how the right tool goes a long way for making sure that you know what's going on in the background. This is a very complex concept, but the right tool allows you to get emails on if something is being used that you want to know about. Okay? Let's move on to our final one, resource access. Now, resource access is becoming more and more popular. As I travel around the world, I constantly get questions, mainly around financial institutions around the world, saying we are being required to track access to some of our critical files and folders. So what is it about files and folders that we need to track? Two things, in my opinion. One, we need to make sure that we know who has access. There is an access control list associated with every file and folder, and that access control list tells us who has access. Secondly, I want to know what access is being performed for those users that have the access. So let's run reports on who has access. Now, I'm going to pick on a file here. On my drive, I have let's go to software. Let's do software. You'll notice that I have some software here, okay? So I need to run a report on who has access to software. Now, if I right-click and go to Properties, and I go to Security, you'll see that I have a list. This is called the Access Control List. I cannot resize this window, so running a report from here is very difficult because not only do I need to know what access, I need to get the details around this. So I need to know what Derek has, because Derek has special, and I don't know what special is. In order to see this, I have to come in here to look at the list. So this becomes very cumbersome. Now, you have a built-in tool on every Windows machine that allows you to look at the details of the permissions of a folder or file. It's called iCackles. Okay? I-C-A-C-L-S. You will need to print out this list, which decrypts what the access is. Now, in order to run this, you run iCackles, and then you run the path to the file or folder that you're looking at, and it will print out for you what the access is. Notice it right here. For me, I think this is not very friendly. This is not the ideal way to look at this. Now, if you use a tool that's designed to do this, now I know many of you probably have a tool for this. Whether it is AD Manager Plus, whether it's File Audit Plus, whether it's some other tool, I guarantee you, you have a tool that allows you to generate these types of reports, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to select the correct path, right? So you're going to go to the correct server. You're going to click on the folder that you want, right? And you can generate these reports. So these types of reports, now this is a little bit easier to read, right, than the other report that you saw. So what I'm saying is the right tool can go a long way for getting you the details instead of having to decrypt everything. So again, run the right report on who has access. From here, you have to analyze if it's correct. Now, how do I analyze? You are going to have some groups. Here's administrators. How do we determine who has membership and administrators? Well, let's go to the built-in way. If I come here to my domain controller and I go and I find administrators and I go to the members, you will see that I have a list. Now, some of you are going to have a list that goes beyond, and you're going to have a scroll bar, but you cannot resize this, so this immediately becomes kind of a bad tool for this. Second of all, even if I do a screen capture of this, I have groups nested in the group. So that means I either have to go through and do this down all the way to the users, or I'm going to have to somehow get the users that are in this group through nested groups. Now, Microsoft does have a solution for this, and if we go to PowerShell, the Active Directory module for PowerShell, you will see that I can run a tool called Get AD Group Member for administrators, and I can run this recursively, and I can get a list of all the users that are part of this group recursively through group nesting, okay? But I don't know about you, if I give this report to an auditor or a non-admin, they're going to have no idea how to decrypt this. So instead, again, I encourage a tool that's designed to do this. AD Manager Plus, through a couple of clicks, can get details, users and groups of a group, and the report can be generated. This is the list instead of that horrible list that PowerShell gives you, and I can export this into PDF in about 5 seconds. Getting the correct report efficiently goes a long way. Now, at this point, I know who has access, I analyze if it's correct, and I configure it. Now I want to know who touches it. I want to know if things change, right? You need to know if the ACL changes, and you need to know what access people have. You can do that again through Event Viewer. In the security log, in the thousands of events, when the file system is accessed, you can receive emails telling you that that was accessed. But you cannot, watch right here, when I associate a task, you will notice there is no detail beyond the event ID to receive an email. So you're just going to get tons of emails saying someone accessed a file. Using the right tool, such as AD Audit Plus, gives you the ability to do file auditing, and you can determine, based on what you set up, if any files are modified. Okay? See? Not only do you get the information, you can look at the details about what the access is, the permissions, and everything else. Okay? So I'm telling you that the right tool allows you to see information that's almost impossible to see without it. And when you go through and you set up your permissions and you do not monitor them, things are going to change. Okay? So when a permission changes, you need a tool that's going to allow you to see that information. Now, I have not changed a permission, so it's not showing up. But if it did, it would show up here. But I now have a tool that allows me to look at information over time and look at the details of what's changing. This is the power of a tool that allows you to see this. And it's the power of a tool that allows you to maintain security. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is I'm going to encourage you to come here to this website, and for all of these areas, you're going to run through reporting, analyzing, configuring, monitoring, and alerting. And when you're done, you are going to have something that looks similar to this. You will notice all of these areas, right? OUACL, that's delegation. GPO permissions, that's delegation. The administrator account, that's securing the administrator account. Admin groups, that's like the domain admins that we first considered. User rights, fine-grained password policies, domain password policy. You are going to set up alerts for all of these areas so that if anything in these critical areas for security hardening changes, you get an email. It's that simple. It really is that simple. In most medium to small organizations, I can set up security hardening, monitoring and alerting in about a day because the tool is so powerful and so flexible and easy to use. That's how I do it. Okay? So what we've gone over in this webinar is the concept of security hardening, and I've given you 3 rock-solid examples of how to correctly report, analyze, configure, monitor, and alert. It's not as easy as you think. That's why we built the security hardening site for you. Okay? So please, use the resources that we've developed for you. Please email us with questions. We built that site so you don't have to put any information about you, but you can still consume the information. Please set up monitoring and alerting. Even if you use the built-in tools from Microsoft, we encourage that as long as you're keeping security in place. We feel that you're going to be frustrated with that solution, so we provide another solution. But if you can set up security, monitoring, and alerting through the Microsoft tools, fantastic, please do it. We just want you to secure your Windows environment. Okay? So that kind of wraps up my time. I have seen quite a few questions come by, and I want to thank everyone on the back end, my team members that have helped me answer those questions as we've gone through. It really means a lot to me, and I hope that you also are thankful that they were able to answer your questions as we went through. Where do you go from here? Well, I've given you some action items. We provide AD Audit Plus and AD Manager Plus and a full-blown tool for you for free for 30 days. Please download the tool and use it. I want you to experience the ease of the tool. It is so powerful that you should be leveraging the tool. Okay? Go watch the video, see what Microsoft is talking about security, and see why the security and hardening website is so important for you. Utilize the resources that we've granted for you. Okay? Email me, email my team members. We are here to help you with your environments. All right? With that, I'm going to let you get back to your day. For me, and everyone else on the AD Solutions team, we want to thank you. Extend a very welcome thanks for you taking your time to meet with us. I see some other questions coming in, and I know that on the back end they're answering those. So if we don't answer a question of yours, we will get to you. We'll email it to you, or they'll wait for all the questions to come through. But for me, I want to thank you. If I am back anywhere else in the world and we have a seminar or user conference, I hope that you can attend. I know that we have quite a few coming up in the fall, late summer and fall for this year. So please come out and see us. But for me and the rest of my team members on the AD Solutions, thank you so much for your time. Please email us with questions, and we'd be more than happy to help you as much as we can. So for Derek Melber and the rest of the AD Solutions team, thank you very much, and have a great rest of your day.